The wind carried a strange chill as the gates of Ravensfield opened. Old leaves rustled across the ground, as if whispering secrets that no one wanted to hear. A lone man walked through the narrow stone path. His clothes were worn. His boots were half torn. His face was shadowed by a long beard that almost hid the deep scars beneath. People paused mid-step. They stared with frozen expressions. It was the same face they had seen in missing posters 12 years ago. The same face that had vanished on a stormy night without a single trace. His name was Elias Rowan, the lost traveler who had never returned. Yet here he was, walking slowly, breathing heavily, eyes fixed on the center of the town. He did not look at anyone. He did not speak. He moved as if he had walked this path in a dream for countless years. A child dropped an apple when she saw him. The fruit rolled toward Elias. He stopped and looked down at it. His hand trembled. His fingers twitched. The sunlight seemed to fade the moment he touched it. A cold shiver ran through everyone who watched. Something was wrong with him. Terribly wrong. Elias lifted his head slowly. His eyes met the crowd. They were not the eyes of the man they once knew. They were hollow, dark, as if he had seen something that had stolen every last piece of warmth from his soul. He took a step forward. The sound of his boots scraping the stone echoed unnaturally loud. Then another step, and another. His voice finally broke the silence. "I have returned," he said. The words were flat, empty, like a memory recited without emotion. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth. She was his sister, Mara. Her hands shook. Her legs weakened. She whispered, "Elias, where have you been?" Elias did not answer. He stared at her with a slow tilt of his head, as if trying to recognize her. As if she was a stranger he had never seen before. Mara stepped closer. The air seemed to grow heavier. The shadows seemed to stretch across the ground. A faint scent drifted from Elias. It was the scent of damp stone, cold earth, and something metallic, something that made Mara's stomach twist. She reached out a trembling hand to touch his arm. Elias took a sharp breath. His body stiffened. His pupils widened in a sudden jolt of fear. "Do not touch me," he whispered. Everyone froze. His voice was not a warning. It was a plea, a desperate, terrified plea. Before anyone could react, Elias lifted his hand to reveal something small clutched in his palm. A piece of shattered bone. Smooth, white, almost polished. He stared at it with trembling fingers. "I brought it back," he said. The wind fell silent. Mara stepped back, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. "What is that?" she whispered. Elias raised his head again. His expression was blank. His voice grew softer. "It followed me." A thin shadow shifted behind him. Long, distorted, moving against the light, the shadow stretched toward the crowd. It was not cast by the sun. It had no source except the air itself. The hairs on the back of every neck stood up. Mara took a step back, gripping her sister tightly. Elias remained frozen. His hand still held the small bone. The shadow seemed to move on its own, crawling along walls and stones, slipping through cracks in the cobblestone path. People whispered in fear. A dog barked in the distance, its sound distant but eerily close, as if coming from inside their own skulls. The air grew heavy and damp. A faint humming filled the silence, low and vibrating. It penetrated the ears, the chest, and the bones themselves. Elias knelt slowly. The crowd did not move. No one dared breathe. He placed the bone on the stone path. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if it had been repelled. Then it surged forward. The bone shattered into 100 tiny fragments. A scream echoed from the very walls, hollow and unnatural. It was not human. It was not animal. It was something that had been waiting for 12 long years. Elias covered his face with trembling hands. He sank to his knees completely. The crowd pressed backward, but the shadow moved faster than any person could, slipping between them, enveloping the space around Elias like smoke that tasted of cold iron and rot. Mara ran to him. Her tears fell like rain. She reached for his shoulder, but before she could touch him, the shadow lifted him from the ground. He did not scream. He did not struggle. He hung suspended, motionless, as if his body had been drained of all will. The wind roared through the town square. A church bell rang, though no one had touched the bell rope. Its sound was broken, twisted, and hollowed out. The shadow began to speak, but its voice was not sound. It was an echo in the mind. A message carved in fear and ice. Do not linger, it whispered. Do not call them. They wait in silence. They remember. Elias's lips moved, but no words came. The people who watched felt their stomachs twist. The sun seemed to dim. The shadows lengthened unnaturally. Even the stone walls of the town shivered under a cold wind that carried whispers, faint screams, and the scent of something that had rotted long before they were born. Then Elias fell. He collapsed to the ground, lifeless, yet his eyes were wide open. They glowed faintly, a pale gray that reflected nothing of the world around them. Mara screamed. People scrambled backward. The shadow faded, but the silence it left was heavier than any noise. Mara crawled to him. She shook him. Elias, speak to me, please. His hand twitched. A single word escaped his lips, barely audible, trembling like dry leaves in wind. Run. Before she could respond, the wind blew again. The shadow returned, darker, thicker, as if the world itself had cracked. The town square felt smaller. Every building seemed to lean in, pressing toward them. Mara looked around. Everyone else was frozen. She tried to scream, but no sound came. The bone fragments had rearranged themselves. They formed a shape, a figure, crouching, faceless, but knowing. It tilted its head toward Elias, who lay still on the ground, eyes glowing brighter now. The crowd could not move. They could not blink. Even their hearts seemed to stop. Then the figure spoke in a voice that was not voice. It filled every thought at once. You took too long. You cannot return what you do not carry. They will come for all who remember. Elias's chest rose and fell rapidly. He tried to speak again. Leave them, free. The shadow responded with a twisting motion. The ground beneath them cracked, a fine line that grew wider in a heartbeat. From the fissure, a smell rose. Rotten earth, burnt wood, and something metallic. Something alive and hungry. The people in the square stumbled back, but the fissure grew fast, spreading toward every corner of the town. The faceless figure crouched over the fissure, its presence bending the air. Elias began to rise. His body moved against reason. His eyes glowed with something unnatural. He whispered again, his voice different. You must forget. Then the shadow struck. A wave of darkness surged outward. Mara felt herself lifted, weightless, as if she were being pulled into the earth. The town around her dissolved into mist. The screams of those who were caught echoed, then vanished. And then there was silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. Mara opened her eyes. She was alone. The town square was empty. The sun had vanished behind thick, dark clouds. The buildings seemed abandoned, cracked, and older than memory. Elias was gone. No trace of him remained. Except for the bone fragments. They were now arranged in a circle. A symbol that made her chest tighten. She felt a pulse, faint, coming from beneath the stone. A pulse that was slow, deliberate, and alive. Her hand reached toward the circle. As soon as she touched it, a cold fire burned through her fingers. She screamed, and the wind returned. It whispered her name. It whispered Elias's name, and it whispered of something waiting. Something that had been patient for 12 years. Something that had never left. Something that would not forgive. The sky turned black. The ground shook. And the last sound she heard before the world seemed to fold in on itself was Elias's voice, calm, but hollow. Remember nothing. Forget everything. Or join me. The wind carried the words into every corner of the town, and then silence claimed everything. The town was gone. Only the circle of bone fragments remained, glowing faintly in the absence of sun. Mara fell to her knees. Her fingers hovered over the circle. And in the distance, far beyond the horizon, a faint shadow moved. The wind fell silent. Mara sat frozen, her hands hovering over the circle of bone fragments. The cold fire that had burned her fingers was gone. All that remained was a faint glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. For a long moment, she could hear nothing. Then she heard it, a soft, whispering voice, distant yet unmistakable. Do not linger. She looked around, but the town was empty. The buildings were crumbled, the streets cracked, and the sky above was a pale, washed-out gray. The shadow had vanished, and yet the air felt heavy, as if it were holding its breath. Mara slowly rose to her feet. She stepped back from the circle. The bone fragments remained, neatly arranged, silent, and cold. Her mind struggled to process what had happened. 12 years, a missing brother, a shadow that consumed the town, a warning she did not fully understand. And yet, Elias's voice lingered in her memory. She knew he had returned to protect them, or perhaps to warn them. Or perhaps he had been trapped all along, a prisoner of something older and darker than any living soul. Mara took a deep breath. She realized she had a choice. She could linger, uncover every secret, risk being consumed by what Elias had faced. Or she could leave, carrying the memory of him, carrying the warning, and let the shadows remain in the domain. She turned away from the town square. Her footsteps were heavy on the cracked stones. Every shadow seemed to bend toward her, as if watching her leave. The sun began to pierce the gray sky, faint at first, then stronger, as if the world itself was breathing again. Mara reached the edge of the town. She stopped and looked back one last time. The circle of bone fragments glowed faintly. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing at the center, watching her. Elias. Then he was gone. The town remained silent. The air was still, and for the first time in 12 years, Mara felt the weight of fear lift slightly. She walked down the road, each step carrying a mixture of grief, memory, and survival. The shadow would always exist. The town would always bear its mark. But she was alive, and she carried a story that no one would believe. She would never forget Elias, the lost traveler who had returned. She would never forget the warning. And she would never look back. As the road stretched ahead, empty but hopeful, the wind whispered softly through the trees. It was a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, life continues. Even in the deepest silence, memory remains. And even after 12 years, some travelers do return, not to stay, but to leave a mark that time cannot erase. Mara walked on, the glow of the circle fading behind her. The lost traveler had returned. And now, the living must carry the story. The shadow waits, but the world moves forward. And sometimes, that is enough.